Hey guys, welcome to our Grace Church Ellett online service. My name is Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here at the Ellett campus. So excited you're joining us today, whether you're at a watch party, joining us online, or even in person at our offices. So glad you guys took time out of your morning to join us. So thanks for being here. I want to let you know about a couple of things going on. First is this coming Tuesday, we have Biblical Beliefs coming up. This is a great class for wherever you are in your faith to kind of learn more about what Christians believe. Not necessarily just what we believe as a church, but what the Bible says. And it's incredible knowledge to have. You will learn a lot and you will appreciate it no matter where you are. So if you haven't taken that, be sure to let us know you want to sign up for that. That's going to have an in-person and a Zoom option. So we'll get you into that however you're most comfortable. But be sure to take advantage of that, especially if you're looking to become a member of our campus eventually. That is one of the classes for that as well. Second thing I want to let you know about is we have a town hall meeting coming up on August 3rd. And you are going to want to put that on your calendar. We have some really exciting news to share with you about kind of next steps for our campus. That's going to be over Zoom only. So reach out to us, let us know you want to be at that, and we will get you the link. And we're really excited to share some news with you on that date. Guys, again, so glad that you're here. Thank you guys for just kind of reaching out to us here in the comments. Thank you for seeing us in person and reaching out. It's been really good to connect with you in a bunch of different ways and just kind of hear how everyone is doing. Those of you that have been giving during this time, thank you for doing that as well and being faithful in that way. If you're interested in giving at our campus, we can actually sign you up for that online. You can do it through our app, or you can reach out to us if you need a different way to do that. If you need anything else at all, please reach out to us. We would love to connect with you, to pray for you, or to help get you connected, or just kind of see how you're doing. Thanks again for being here this morning. Let's kick things off together with some music.
1, 2, 1. Sing this together. Salvation sounds a new beginning. As distant hearts begin believing, redemption's bid is unrelenting. Your love goes on. Your love goes on. You carry us when the world gives way. You cover us with your endless grace. Your love is relentless. Your love is relentless. Your love is relentless. Your love is relentless. Time is up for chasing shadows. You gave the world a light to follow, a hope that shines beyond tomorrow. Your love goes on. Your love goes on. Oh, you carry us when the world gives way. You cover us with your endless grace.
morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Glad to be with you this morning. Ryan here from our Elliott campus, and excited to be taking some steps forward here as a campus. As you just heard from Pastor Aaron, I want to just reiterate something that he was mentioning there about our town hall meeting. And if you have any interest in becoming a part of our Elliott campus, or maybe if you consider your Elliott campus kind of your home church, I would just encourage you strongly to tune in that night and make sure to hear the details of kind of where we're going as a campus as we move forward and as we continue to kind of take steps in opening up the next phase as we move forward as a campus. So look forward to seeing you there. Make sure to jot that on your calendar, and that will be an investment of time that'll be worth your while. Well, I'm excited about this series we've been in for a while now called Same But Different, and what we've been saying is that we're all kind of longing to get back to some kind of sameness. And we've been saying whether or not we're going to be able to do that anytime soon is a different conversation, but we want it, right? We want to get back to the same. And we said that whenever our same is kind of interrupted, whenever our normal is interrupted, one of the ways that we can view it that I think is very, very healthy is we can view that as an opportunity to make some intentional changes in our lives and in kind of how we approach life. And so we said we want to go back to same, but we want to do that whenever that happens, we want to do that differently. We want to make some changes and be intentional about that. So that's what we've been talking about over the last handful of weeks now, looking at things like time and our technology. We've been looking at kind of how we form opinions and convictions in our lives, and even kind of how we would make decisions about what's normal and what kind of defines life for us. And so those are all things that we've been talking about. If you've missed any of those conversations, if you're maybe just jumping in the conversation with us today, I'd encourage you to maybe go back and get caught up on those over those last handful of weeks, and I think you'll be glad that you did. And what we want to do today is kind of look at another slice of life today that we want to go back a little bit differently in. And so as we kind of approach sameness and long to have that in our lives, we want to go back different in the area of kind of our money, our finances. And if you're somebody maybe who grew up in church, sometimes you get a little nervous. I think we all do a little bit talking about money in church. And let me just encourage you and maybe quell some fears that you might have. This is not going to be an elongated conversation about all the reasons why you should give to the church. It's a little bit broader of a conversation than that. We're talking about money at a pretty high level and kind of all the ways that it would affect our lives. And we know that. We know that money is an important thing in our lives. It's why we get a little bit emotional when we think about it, when we talk about it, when we have conversations about it. Because the reality is a lot of us, we're going to spend a good chunk of our lives earning money. And that money and where we put that money in some ways ends up being a bit of how we invest our lives, at least a portion of it. So that's the conversation we're going to dive into. And one of the things that's tricky about money is that you can't quite put it all into one box. It feels like it would be easier if we could just say, you know, the right way to interact with your money is just to do this, kind of go to one extreme. You could just save all of your money, or if you could just spend all of your money, or invest all of your money, or give all of your money. It'd be easy to be able to just say, yeah, just do that one thing, and then all of your money problems would be taken care of. I think we all recognize that that's not how money works. That's not how we work with money. And so that creates some complexity for us about the balance between those kinds of things. How much should I spend? How much should I give? How much should I invest? How kind of frugal should I be? Those are all questions I think that most of us have questions about and think through. And when we think about our money and what we want it to do for us and kind of where it lives in our lives, a lot of us, I think, have some confusion around it. As a culture, we have some confusion around it. And we said, well, boy, can we go back differently with some more clarity about the place that money plays in kind of our hearts, our minds, and in our lives? Because we know this culturally that the vast majority of American culture in a given year is going to spend more than we earn. We know that, right? We know the stats, and we kind of know that the big picture that financial tension in relationships is one of the leading causes of divorce. We know that financial stress is a major cause of kind of emotional unhealth and anxiety. So this is a big part of our lives. And as we dive into this, what I want to do is I want us to be introduced to a big idea, right? A big idea about money. And it's not just about money. It's actually broader than money, but it's going to change the way that we view our money, and it's going to change the way, I think, that we view our lives. All right, so I want to introduce us to this big idea, and then we're going to walk through kind of 5 ways that we can interact with money in a purposeful, intentional way, kind of all coming out of this big idea that I'm going to introduce us to here in a second from the scripture. So here's what it is, right? So if you have notes, maybe jot this down. Here's the first big idea I want us to grab, and it's simply this. We manage, we don't own. We manage, we don't own. As an American person, I like to think that I own things. I like to think that I own my house, and I like to think that I own my possessions, right? And that I'm kind of in charge of those and control of those, and they're mine, right? Even from the youngest age, children have a longing to say, that's mine. We all want that word to be true. The reality is, though, if I recognize that there is a God and that God has created everything, then the reality is that everything that exists that has been created by God ultimately is His, right? It's His. Here's this great passage that shows up in Psalm 24. Here's what it says. It says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." Right, the writer of the Psalms is recognizing a truth that is very, very powerful, that God as creator has put kind of His stamp of ownership over everything that exists, including us. Right? I don't own me. I don't own my life. It can be taken from me. I can actually take it from myself. Right? All of my possessions can be taken. Everything that we're going to be interacting with in this life is a temporary thing. I'm not going to have my money forever, my house forever. All that's going to go away, and ultimately, all of those resources are the Lord's. They're not mine. I don't own them. I manage them during my days and kind of my time here on the planet. That mindset shift is kind of a massive one. It's a huge deal, and it causes us, I would argue, to live very, very differently. When I get a hold of the reality that I don't have the freedom to just do whatever I want to do with my life and with my money and even with my time, that actually I'm a manager of God's resources, it changes the way that I interact with those resources. I was thinking back to my early days when we first started having kids. Lori and I we've got 4 kids. And we had them all really close together. We had some infertility, and then we eventually were able to get pregnant, and then we just had kids like, man, nonstop. We had the first one, and then the second one, and the third one. We're like, is there like an off switch to this? Right? They just kept coming. And so we had 4 kids in 5 years. And so we had lots and lots of kids. And right in the middle of that window, we had a couple kids, right? They were just kind of multiplying. It's crazy. We just bought our first home. We bought a nice little house in Kenmore, and had just moved into the first house that we had purchased. And we were tired, right? We were tired from ministry. We were tired from parenting. We had little kids, and we were going to go on a vacation that somebody who we knew had offered to let us stay at a place that they owned. And they reached out to us and said, "Hey, do you guys want to stay here? Like, we have this place down at the beach, and we'd love to lend that to you and let you stay there." And we were like blown away. And so we have in mind that like we were going to be thrilled to have any time away just to kind of get out of Dodge and go spend some time as a family and recoup. So we grabbed our in-laws who went with us and our couple little tiny baby kids, right, super small, and we make our way down into the Carolinas, here where this place was. And as we show up, I mean, my expectations, our expectations were like, we're super low. We were going to be thrilled to have anything. And as we walk into this place, it was like kind of decked out. And we were just like in awe of it, looking around at this amazing place that we landed right by the beach. And we respected the people a ton that let us borrow this. and we really wanted to do a good job kind of taking care of it and making sure that we left it better than we found it. And so as we're kind of living there, it was maybe the first or second day, we're living there really trying to be kind of be careful with the place that has been lent to us, really enjoying it all along the way. I walk up to go close the curtains. There's massive, kind of the big curtains and blinds that go down, and I move the curtains, and it's like this massive crash, right? It all just falls down off these huge double doors, and I'm like, I have just broken something in this place that I am borrowing. I'm freaking out a little bit, right? Because I'm thinking, I don't know, do we have enough money to fix this? And I want to make sure that he knows that we're going to take this seriously and we're grateful for what we've been given. And my attitude towards taking care of this place that I was managing, that I was borrowing, honestly, was probably pretty different than if this happened in my house, right? As a young parent and as a kind of a young adult starting off in life, right? If I broke this at my house at that time, I'd probably say, you know what? That's fine. Like, we'll replace it with a cheaper one. Maybe we'll get to it eventually. Not a big deal. But because I valued this person and I valued what they had borrowed, kind of lent to me, I was serious about making sure that this thing got fixed and rectified. I took it seriously because I had a respect for him and I was grateful for what he put in my life. Now, I think that's what happens to us when we start to get this mindset shift that I'm not an owner, I'm a manager. This place, this thing, this set of resources I have in kind of what I've been entrusted with in my life isn't mine just to squander or be selfish with. I can enjoy it and there's room for that. We're going to talk about that. If it's true that God owns everything and he has put into my care, he has entrusted to me his resources, then I'm going to approach managing those resources and maximizing those resources very, very differently than if it's just mine and I'm only really accountable to me and to what I want and kind of how I want to interact with it. It's fascinating. And when we start to talk about our money, this specifically is going to show up because I start to see myself as a manager of that money, and because of the nature of money, money needs a manager. Now, if you grew up in church, or maybe you grew up in a family that viewed money in a negative light, sometimes you're going to hear that money is bad, that it is evil. Sometimes there'll be a verse misquoted from 1 Timothy that says money is the root of all evils. That's not what the scriptures say. It says the love of money is the root of all evils. Maybe you grew up in a home that's on the other side kind of the view of money, and money was viewed very, very positively, that really, if you want to make it in life, you need to be rich, and you need to make a lot of money, and that's what defines success, and maybe so you would view money maybe a different way. Maybe you view it as something that's very, very good. The reality is money is not evil, it's not good, it's neutral. It needs to be managed, though. It needs to be driven somewhere. It needs to be overseen to certain purposes, or else it's just kind of neutral. It's just a tool, right? And at the end of the day, that's kind of how money works. And one of the things that God does is he allows us, as his followers or followers of Christ, and just kind of people at large, is he entrusts us with his resources, with money. And then what's going to happen is my view of money and kind of my character is going to determine which direction that money gets managed into. It's fascinating how that all works. And here's a great example of it that comes out of the book of Genesis, as we're starting to talk about this idea of being a manager of God's resources. Now, the word that the Bible would use is a steward, somebody that is entrusted with the resources of another. And here's kind of the situation that Joseph found himself in the kind of the first book of the Bible. Here's what it says: Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything that he owned. Joseph was a steward or a manager for Potiphar's resources, right? Potiphar would look at Joseph and say, Joseph, I want you to be the manager of it. I'm going to entrust all this to your care. I'm kind of going to relinquish the direct management of it myself. I'm going to pull away from it, and I'm going to trust you, Joseph, to be faithful with it, to do the best that you can with it, to manage it well. And that's what Joseph worked to do, right? And that's kind of the situation that we're in today, is God would look at us and say, listen, whether it's a lot or a little, whether it's big or small, kind of whatever lot that we have found ourselves in, God would look at us and say, what I want you to do is I'm entrusting these resources to you, and I want you to be faithful with them. This money that I've put in kind of your care, I want you to be faithful with that, because I've entrusted it to you as a kind of a trust in my care. So let's talk about how this is going to work. And I want us to walk through these 5 different ways that we can manage and kind of manage faithfully. And this isn't comprehensive. It's not going to cover all the bases, but we're going to walk through a handful of these and kind of buckle up. I'm going to walk us through quite a bit of information here. And I think this is going to be very, very helpful as we start to get our mind around what does it look like to manage faithfully for God. And this is kind of the way that we want to go back different. I don't want to go back to money and view it as just something that's mine. I want to recognize that this is different. This is God's money. It's His resources. It's His earth. Even my life is His. So I want to be faithful with it. So here's the first one. I want to manage for provision. I want to manage for provision. Great verse in 1 Timothy. Paul says to Timothy, he says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Right? So that's the first thing we're going to want to see, is we want to manage for provision. This is the idea of being a provider. So if you are in a family setting where people depend on you, if you have children, if you have a spouse, fellas, if you're the head of a household, maybe moms, if you are the single mom who's the head of a household, providing for the people that are under your care. Sometimes that will show up and kind of pour out into extended family members, if that is appropriate or makes sense, taking care of parents at times. But certainly for the immediate household of taking care of children, people who can't take care of themselves, he's saying that what we need to do is be providers, right? God is our provider, but I manage towards that provision. I work hard to make sure that God's resources are going towards the people that need them. And that's something that is God honoring to do. Obviously, it's a very serious thing, the way that Paul's talking about it here, that if we don't do that, boy, that's looked upon very poorly. One of the greatest ways that we can show our faith is to faithfully, kind of regularly, consistently provide, to work at employment and fight for that and make sure that is steady. That is a God-honoring thing. So for those of you who have been kind of faithfully working at provision, whether you're in work or out of work, if you're fighting to do that, longing to be a person who's faithfully providing, that is bring honor and glory to God and is very, very important. All right, so I want to manage for provision, for providing for the people in our lives and kind of providing our basic needs, of course, being met. Here's the next one. Manage for generosity. Manage for generosity. If you have been exposed to the Bible at all, one of the biggest, loudest messages that's going to come through is something that's really counterintuitive. And here's the idea. It's something that Jesus said. He said that it's more blessed to give than to receive. Crazy idea. It's more blessed to give than to receive. And so being generous, right, taking care of and blessing other people is one of the highest joys that we can have in life. Right? So I want to manage towards generosity because this is a big part of God's heart, is seeing other people be taken care of, seeing God's work being taken care of, kind of seeing that all marching forward. Let me show you these great passages here in the book of Proverbs. Here's one of them. It says, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Well, what Proverbs is kind of promising here is there's a blessedness to taking care of people who don't have their needs met, to kind of taking care of the poor. What this verse isn't saying is that this is not the prosperity gospel. God's not saying, hey, if you take care of a poor person, that you're going to get rich. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that you're going to be blessed, and that blessing can show up in, of course, the joy of giving, can show up in an increased relationship with Christ, can show up in all kinds of ways. Sometimes it's financial, but it's certainly not directly tied in some of the ways that we would hear in our culture, in the teaching that is not true, that is false. But what does show up is there's a guarantee of blessedness to generosity. When we live like that, when we give like that, it is going to lead us to a place of blessing. Here's the next one. Proverbs 21, he says, all day long he craves for more. He's talking about the sluggard, somebody who's lazy. It's a great word. We don't use that much anymore. I love that word. The sluggard is somebody who is found to be very lazy in life. They don't want to work much. All day long he craves for more, but the righteous give without sparing. Here's the idea that the righteous person is somebody who works hard to provide, of course, for the people around them, and then goes beyond that and continues to give generously and has some to share with the people around them. All right, so this idea of generosity is huge. And of course, the generosity shows up in our kind of day-to-day interactions. If you're a follower of Jesus, of course, there's a giving component towards a kind of church in your life. And let me just say this, especially if you're nervous or kind of squeamish, or maybe you have some baggage revolving around giving to church, or somebody manipulated you with that message. Here at Grace, we are very clear about this. We know the Bible teaches that you should give, and you should give to your local church. But we would say this: if you're checking Grace Church out right now, maybe if you just started watching online or just kind of connected here in the last couple of weeks or last couple of months, let me just say this. We don't want you to feel any pressure to give financially to Grace. Now, with all kinds of a clear conscience, I would look at you and say, you should give somewhere. You should give towards something that you believe in that advances the gospel of Jesus. And as you're investigating what church to land at and kind of what you're going to make your home, give to something that you can believe in. Right? And 10% of your giving is the idea that the Bible kind of recommends and points to and asks us to have it kind of as the pattern of life, as at least 10%. And so we'd say, if you don't feel comfortable giving that to Grace, give it somewhere else. But give it, because it's important to detach money from our hearts and our hearts from our money. Because Jesus says those things are tied together. And when I invest some of my money into the kingdom and kind of God's purposes, as I manage His resources to advance His purpose, that is good for me, and that advances what God wants done with His resources. Right? It's super, super important. All right, I want to manage for generosity. Here's the next one. I want to manage for the unexpected. Right? I want to manage for the unexpected. We know we live in a fallen, imperfect world. We're feeling that more maybe than usual here in 2020, aren't we? Right? There's a lot of unexpected things happening this year. And those unexpected, those emergencies, those things that erupt and show up into our lives can create chaos, and they can frankly cause enormous financial stress and pressure. So in light of that, the Bible actually would encourage us, before the unexpected shows up, to live a certain way and to interact with our finances and manage them in a certain way that's going to help us be prepared for when that unexpected shows up. Here's a couple great Proverbs. Here's one in Proverbs 13:6. A wise man, he says, thinks ahead. A fool doesn't and even brags about it. Right? Simple idea. But the Proverbs are saying there is wisdom in looking down the road a little bit and saying, you know what, there's probably going to be something that comes, there's probably an emergency that's going to come. I'm probably going to have, a limb of a tree go through my roof someday, or that car's going to break down, my refrigerator's going to go out, you name it. And I'm going to think about that and recognize that that's going to happen at some point. We don't know what unexpected thing is going to happen, but we know it's going to happen. I want to think about it and be as prepared as I can for that when it happens. Right? I want to manage for the unexpected. Goes on, the wise store up choice food and oil, but fools gulp theirs down. Love it. So a lot of times in the Proverbs, you hear about the wise and the fool. And what's commended, what is celebrated here, is the wise person recognizes, hey, I could just kind of consume everything I have right now. Rather than doing that, I'm going to set a little bit aside for later. I'm going to pull a little bit of that resource over here because the unexpected, there may be a day that comes when I'm not going to have as much food as I have today. And we can take that principle and extract that into our life and say, this is why we would have kind of a savings account. This is why we would have an emergency fund. This is why we wouldn't live all the way up to our means. We would take some and set it aside just in case there's something unexpected that pops up so that I'm ready for it and that doesn't have to consume me when the emergency hits because we know it's going to happen. Right? Manage for the unexpected. So, right, I manage for provision, manage for generosity, manage for the unexpected. Here's the next one, 4 out of our 5, manage for the future. Just like I would look down the road and see, okay, there's probably going to be some emergencies happening. I want to look a little further down the road, in that there's probably going to be some years of my life when I may not be able to work, or I may choose not to give my efforts and my energy to the job that I'm in now. I may want to, the word we would use is retire. And while I would never encourage anybody to retire unto nothing, to no purpose, because I don't think that's going to show up in the Bible anywhere, there may come a time where we stop doing our job that we have done for many, many years, and we start to give ourselves to a different set of purposes, right? Give ourselves more, maybe to our local church, or give ourselves to the needy, or serve in a specific way, invest in the grandchildren, you name it, right? So when those days come, when my later years come, and they're going to come, right, Lord willing, I'm going to want to be ready for those. So it makes some sense to manage my resources, my financial resources for the future, and kind of be ready for that. So this is a fascinating idea, and certainly God commends this kind of interaction of moving money and setting it aside for later times. Here's the idea. Proverbs 6, here's one of the things the writer of Proverbs says. He looks at the ant. He says, go to the ant, you sluggard. There's our word again. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer, no ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. Okay. So basically, the writer of Proverbs is saying, hey, look at the ant. The ant has no boss, right? Nobody's telling him what to do. No one's driving his efforts, and yet he's diligent to store up his provisions in the summer and kind of be ready for the future, right? He's kind of being diligent to do the right thing at the right time, so he's ready for the future when it comes. Love that. Here's the next one, Ecclesiastes 11:2. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. Boy, is that true. Certainly feel that here in 2020. Saying it, make wise investments, kind of diversify those investments a little bit, and be ready for the future as best that you can. Right? There's wisdom, and we're commending that wisdom from the Scriptures to be ready for our future years. It is a God-honoring thing to have been diligent and self-controlled in our youth so that we don't have to be dependent on our children when we age. I think that's a very God-honoring thing, and certainly something that we should look to, right? So I manage for provision, manage for generosity, manage for the unexpected, and manage for the future. And then here's the last one, is I want to manage for enjoyment. It is a myth to think that God just wants to make everybody rich and healthy and happy. Certainly, I think he would long for us to have that one day, of course, in heaven. We look forward to that. But that's not what's promised to us in the gospel. However, God does give gifts to his children, and he loves for us to be able to enjoy those. So while we should be wise and diligent to do the right things, when it comes to what's left after, it's okay to manage for enjoyment, and certainly to think about making memories with the kids and kind of enjoying life and taking delight in God as we worship him through enjoying his creation. Here's what Paul says to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:17. He says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." And of course, a huge part of how we enjoy God's blessings is by giving, is by kind of managing his resources. We also don't want to be in a place where we never feel the freedom to make a memory with a spouse or a child, where we never feel the freedom to be able to enjoy. It's just getting it in the right order, right? I want to make sure that I'm being faithful to God with what he has given me, to take care of the people in my life, and to be wise with my resources. And then for the little bit that's left over, it's totally fine to enjoy with gratitude and with an open hand the things that God has given to us. Right? This is a massive conversation, guys, as we start to look at all these kind of 5 ways that we might manage the resources that God has given us. And you say, Ryan, what do we do with all this? And here's a good question, I think, for you if you're kind of asking that yourself. One of the best things that we can do as followers of Jesus is start with that big paradigm shift to recognize that the things that I have in my life right now, I don't own those. I am simply a manager of them. My possessions and my clothes and my vehicle and my house and my phone, right? I want to look at what these things are, and while there's a natural gravity to feel an ownership of those, and I get it, legally we own them, right? I get it. But on a bigger scale, on kind of the spiritual reality of things, I'm not the owner, I'm simply the manager. And so I want to make that shift. And as I make that shift, it's going to cause me, I think, at least it works this way in my life, to take the role that I have of managing God's resources more seriously, more soberly, and to manage those in a way that brings honor and glory to God. So here's what I would say. If you're kind of maybe at the starting point and you're saying, hey, Ryan, I have no idea. Like, they don't teach this stuff in school. How do I get started on all of this? Boy, I felt like this as well. In my 20s, I discovered Dave Ramsey is the guy who I was listening to at the time. He was teaching me just kind of how to get my finances in order. There's some great resources out there to grab hold of on how to make a budget and how to get started, how to have an emergency fund, kind of how to get things in the right place, in the right order. And if you're down that road and maybe you need a little more help with that, please reach out, or you can find some great resources, of course, from Dave Ramsey or others who have really done a great work on teaching on how to be faithful with the resources that God has given us. Maybe you're on the other kind of end of the spectrum here, and maybe you're kind of really diligent with your resources, and this is something that you've spent a lot of time on. What I would encourage you to think through even now is what am I managing? What am I managing all this for? Right? Is this just so that my money, quote unquote, can be maximized, and so I can enjoy life to the fullest and kind of have what I want to have? Or is there a deeper reason that maybe God would press into us? Is there a legacy that God is looking to ask you to leave behind? Because, right, we're managing it for Him, and we can't take it with us. How can I utilize what God has given me to maximize His glory and His kingdom as He continues to want to reign in the hearts and lives of people here on the earth? So whether I'm just getting started or have been in this road for a long time, all of us, can we start by looking at that big reality that none of this is mine, this is God's, and I want to make that shift and kind of start wherever I am in the process. I want to go back to my money differently, recognizing who the true owner is. Would you do that as we sing and pray together, wrestle through kind of what God might have you do this week as we go back a little bit different? Would you pray with me? Father, I want to say thank you. Thanks that you trust us, Lord. Lord, even after we have failed you, as your word has called us enemies, that we have lived as enemies at times against you, you have chosen, Lord, to send your Son to heal the brokenness in our relationship with you through his death on the cross, and to not only just heal it, God, but to invite us and include us in your family as children. And God, as children, you have called us heirs, and you have entrusted us with the things of this world to manage for your glory and for our good. And so God, help us with this. Help us to believe that. Help us to say thank you with it, to be wise, and to maximize our efforts for you, for your name, for your fame, and for your kingdom. We love you, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
You've overcome this world with love and made my fight your own. I lift my eyes, throw fear aside, and sing out into the night. 'Cause even when the world caves, even when the fight calls, even when the war's waged, I'll take heart. I know you are greater, forever you are Savior. I will sing your praise with all that I have, with all that I am, Lord.
I stare down the waves, 'cause you own the tide. I'll still my soul and know you wait for me on waters wide, where faith rose above the storm.
'Cause even when the world caves, even when the fight calls, even when the war's waged, I'll take heart. 'Cause I know you are greater, forever you are Savior. I will sing your praise with all that I have, with all that I am, Lord. With all that I have, with all that I am, Lord. I won't let the storm weather my heart, won't let the darkness beat me down. I'll sing in the night, my hope alive in you. I'll walk through the fire and not be burned, pray in the fight and watch it turn. Jesus, tonight I'll give it all to you. I won't let the storm weather my heart, won't let the darkness beat me down. I'll sing in the night, my hope alive in you. I'll walk through the fire and not be burned, pray in the fight and watch it turn. Jesus, tonight I give it all to you. Even when the world caves, even when the fight calls, even when the war's waged, I'll take heart. 'Cause I know you are greater, forever you are Savior. We love that. Thanks for being with us, singing with us, worshiping Jesus a little bit this morning. Can't wait to see you guys soon. Have a good week.